everybody. Welcome to the Hallmarkies podcast. And we're really excited today. We have a very special bonus episode of the podcast. We are talking about the AFI Passions Project that I have been doing for the last 50 plus weeks for the patrons. And we introduced the project a year ago, and we had my friend Zita on to talk about the list and kind of give an introduction. And now we're here to kind of catch up on how it's been going. And thank you so much, Zita, for coming on the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, I'm very excited to be back on.
Yeah, thanks. So how have you been? Do you have a good start to your first half of your 2023?
Yes, I did. It's been really nice. The pandemic restrictions have sort of eased,
Good.
and so it's been great getting back out into the world.
Mm-hmm.
And no, I feel as though that's really lifted my mood. Not
Good.
saying that I don't agree with the restrictions being in place, of course, but it is nice to have a bit more freedom to just go to places in person and head to work, for example.
Yeah, it really is. In fact, I am leaving this week. We're recording this on let's see what day is 8th. We're recording this on the 6th. And on Thursday, I am going to Christmas Con, flying to where it's going to be fun. And you don't get to, we really missed out on those sort of group experiences for a while. So I always try to treasure them when we get the chance. So
yeah.
yeah. Yes. So I finished the 50th film in the group, and that was Bringing Up Baby. And I think it's really, I think, a pretty good one to finish that block with. And we're going to talk about, we're not going to talk about every single one of these 50 films, but I thought it'd be kind of fun to talk about highs, lows, and sort of in betweens.
Yes.
And, yes. So I guess maybe we should start talking about ones that I didn't love as much, and then we'll end on the positive. But so one of the early ones that I was not a fan of was Poor Game Bess. Yeah, I thought it was poorly made. I thought it was really strange the way the one actor was on his knees like that to play a little person. That was bizarre. I mean, some of the songs were nice, but the whole thing felt incredibly cheap. And I don't know, I just didn't like the story. I didn't like the performances. It was just not good, I didn't think. What do you think about that one?
No, I'm of the same opinion, and I think it's a real disappointment. It's one of two major films that Otto Preminger made in the 50s, featuring an all-black cast, and you just want better for them. You have these great African-American movie stars in the leading roles, which was radical, especially for the 50s, and yet in both cases, the films are hampered by the fact that they do look like cheap productions. And I think in both cases, the selection of material feels wrong. One of the big problems with Carmen Jones, his previous attempt to sort of do this, is that the lead actress, Dorothy Dandridge, has her voice dubbed by a white woman. And it's very noticeable, I have to say. And it's just one of those touches that really takes away from the film. You want to applaud the bravery, but it doesn't feel as though African-American artists really had a say in the project behind the scenes, which I imagine was probably true.
Yeah. Well, what I was reading was that some of them like walked out on it, that it was not they were as unhappy, it sounds like, with everything that as anybody else. And that's why, I mean, the version that I saw is a really terrible quality version on YouTube because it's out of print. It's not on like any of the streamers or anything like that. So, I mean, I didn't see it in its best light, but I did read that they also had like a big fire, I guess, right before they were starting, and so that affected everything as well as what had read.
Mm.
But yeah, I was just like, wow, why is this not there on this list? Uh,
Yes.
yeah, another one I don't know, I didn't love is Love is a Many Splendored Thing.
Oh
Uh,
gosh, yes, this one is a nightmare. Yet another one that is extremely racist,
yeah,
and I think it falls into that very uncomfortable subcategory of 50s films that think that they're being progressive, but end up just being racist in different ways.
yeah. Yeah,
And
all the Euro Asian. I was like, I never even heard of that before.
oh my gosh, yes. So I suppose we should clarify the main character, Han Soo-yin, played by a white actress, Jennifer Jones, is meant to be Eurasian. And throughout the film, whenever she does something good or bad, she said, "Oh, that's my Eurasian coming out." And there's this very strong implication that
Yeah.
her Asian side is immoral
Mhm.
and her European side is good and pure. And it's also, on top of that, just a film where nothing much really happens. It's very
Yeah.
odd. They're meant to have this grand, tragic love affair, but it doesn't have that sense of forward momentum or
Mhm.
anything really building up. And so when he, spoiler alert, dies tragically at the end of the film, it doesn't pack that emotional wallop that you
Yeah.
want.
Yeah, I agree. I could tell you nothing. I mean, it hasn't been that long since I said, and aside from the Euro Asian part and some other, I couldn't tell you anything about the plot. Like it's just completely forgettable.
Mm.
Yeah. Another one that I didn't like, and it's interesting because I thought that I like melodrama, but it's so hard to pull off, was Coming Home. Didn't love that. I just thought it
Mm.
was so cheesy and um just I didn't feel invested in either of these romances, and I don't know, I thought it was very soapy and to me not in a like entertaining way.
Yes, that was a problem I had too. And I guess my frustration with it is that obviously Jane Fonda is one of the most prominent anti-Vietnam War activists. And I think
Mhm.
there was really the potential there to make an interesting film about her opposition to Americans fighting in that war. But instead, the movie is sort of constructed as this attempt to make a realist drama about what the experiences of a soldier returning from the war are like. And you
Mhm.
have Jane Fonda wildly miscast as this demure housewife
Yeah.
with conservative politics at the beginning of the film, who is sort of exposed to the horrors of the Vietnam War through her relationship with John Voight. And I think it can't help but feel over the course of the film like Jane Fonda is only adopting these different political views because she rather likes having sex with John Voight. And I think that's not the message that they wanted to convey, but it really does feel as though the film doesn't have much to hang its hat on in terms of the serious politics that it wants to engage with.
Yeah. I would rather just watch Harold and Maude. If I'm gonna watch a Hal Ashby movie on this list, I'll watch Harold
Hmm.
because I don't know, it was just I didn't think they had that great a chemistry either, and I think for this kind of soap opera, you
Hmm.
need it to just sizzle, and I didn't think it really sizzled that much, and yeah, it was just kind of like, when is this going to be done? This is really long. Um, but some other ones that I didn't love. One that I think the poster set me up for an expectation that didn't deliver is Picnic. I thought
Ah,
it was okay, like slice of life, I guess, but you'd think from the poster this is gonna be like erotica, like super sexy. And there's not like a single sex scene in the movie. Like he mows the lawn with his shirt off. Okay, I I'm fine with that. But like the movie was just so bland and I was expecting something really spicy from the poster.
yes, and I think as classic film fans, we probably run into this a lot. I'm a big fan of classic films. I think that
Mhm.
plenty of them hold up. The majority of them do, I would say. But every now and then you do come across a film that is very of its time. And I think Picnic is sort of that for the mid 1950s. It's sex tinged in a
Yeah,
way that
that's a good description.
it
Yeah.
doesn't really cut it anymore.
Yeah.
Even the most demure teenage girls nowadays are comfortable with seeing
Yeah.
a limited amount of sexual content.
Yeah.
And this is a film that, as you point out, doesn't even give you that intimacy or that erotic charge.
Yeah.
And I think the narrative ends up seeming very flimsy when you're not, uh, I'm just going to say it, a very repressed and uptight person from the mid 1950s who is
Mhm.
shocked and scandalized by a play or film that
Yeah.
even dares to mention the fact that young people like having sex.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really hold up nowadays. I don't think it has any substantial message beyond
No.
that. And it's crazy. You compare it to something like Baby Doll. I don't know if you've
Yeah.
seen that
I
film.
haven't seen it, but I heard like honestly, it's not any sexier than like Meet Me in St. Louis. Like I
Oh.
like Meet Me in St. Louis has like a similar plot of like they're all getting ready for this big, thing and all, I mean, aside from occasional lawn mowing, that's about all they get. Sexy lawn mowing.
Hmm.
Um, Yes, another one that I know it's important because and they had great chemistry. It's important because that's where they got together. But I thought that To Have and Have Not was bland. I mean, they do have good sparks, but the story, it didn't do much for me. I
I'm on
think
the same
there's
page.
there's lots of other better Bogart movies and Bacall movies than this, in my opinion.
Yes, I guess I'm just going to come out and admit I do love Bogart. He's made plenty of excellent films.
Hmm.
His later collaborations with Hawks, I've always found to be just a bit disappointing. The most common critical defense of them is that they're sort of the ultimate movie star vehicles, in
Hmm.
that they're basically plotless and it's all about the wisecracking dialogue and the wit and the chemistry between these actors. And I suppose I would be fine with that if the plot didn't serve as a distraction in a way, because throughout
Hmm.
To Have and Have Not, you do notice how stupid and nonsensical the narrative is. And it is a distraction from the fact that, oh, Lauren Bacall looks
Yeah.
incredible, is one of the most beautiful human beings to have ever stepped in front of a camera.
Hmm. Yeah. 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 They had amazing chemistry. You could feel it, but you got to have a better story than like it's surprising with the writing pedigree that the movie has that it wasn't better. But
Ho, ho, ho. We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies Patreon.
Do you love Hallmarkies podcast, especially at Christmas?
Do you enjoy the holiday previews, recaps, interviews, and bonus episodes?
If the answer is yes, please consider supporting the Hallmarkies Patreon. We need your help to do what we do both during the Christmas season and all year round.
But not only do you help a podcast led by strong, independent women by becoming a Patreon, you get to become a part of the Hallmarkies family.
Starting at only $2 a month as a patron, you will have access to our Facebook Patreon group where we talk about the movies, shows, and more all year.
We also have many monthly patron watch-alongs with guests like Lacey Chabert, Natalie Hall, Paul Campbell, Mary Lou Henner, and more, giving their behind-the-scenes details of their films.
As a patron, you also have the chance to provide input into the podcast and even join us at different tiers.
So this Christmas season, spread some cheer to the Hallmarkies Patreon and become a member today. You won't regret it.
Go to patreon.com/Hallmarkies to learn more.
That's patreon.com/Hallmarkies.
Another that I have an unpopular opinion. A lot of people love this movie. I've seen it now a couple times and I just don't love it, is Two for the Road. I don't think that Feeney and Hepburn have very good chemistry. I don't like the structure of it, like going back and forth, different times. I don't think it's that funny. I mean, especially that whole section with that little girl. Like, I know that she's supposed to be super annoying, but she succeeds. I don't know. It's kind of boring to me. I just don't think it's that great.
This one is frustrating for me because I can definitely see the potential on display. This is very much an attempt to almost make a European style romantic drama, and the techniques that they use, cross-cutting and so forth, and jumping around in time, are relatively sophisticated, but I always remained on the level of admiring it from a distance. There was a significant emotional remove at play there, and perhaps you could argue that that was deliberate, but I do think that they had the opportunity to get into some deeper, darker stuff in terms of the collapse of long-time marriages. And the movie doesn't really do that. All of their problems seem fairly generic, and other than the cut that we get between the two of them reuniting on a whim after having a big blowout argument, and then we cut to a couple of years later and they both agree, oh, maybe we shouldn't have gotten back together. Maybe it would have been better for both of us if we had just ended it there. Too much of it feels overly idealized for a movie that seemingly wants credit for being gritty and darker than other romantic dramas.
Yeah. It has some fun moments, and I can see people that want a more bittersweet romance or don't really like sort of the happy endings of like like the Hallmark more style of romantic comedy. I can see why they'd appreciate this, but I just wish it was funnier, and I wish that they had better chemistry. So for me, but another one that I was completely underwhelmed by, I don't think this is like a terrible movie, but I thought it was very average, was Reds. This feels like to me one of those movies that gets nominated for Best Picture every year and then everybody forgets about it like almost immediately. And I feel like there's something like that almost every year at the Oscars. And I'm not surprised to hear that this got a lot of Oscar nominations because it is well made. But I don't know, I just thought the story and just caring about this, like I wish it had been more about the revolution and them being reporters and getting in and covering the story. Like that's more interesting to me than this love triangle.
I don't necessarily agree with you on this one. I think there is a lot to recommend Reds. I do not think it is a perfect film. I don't love Warren Beatty's lead performance. However, I do find it somewhat inspiring that he got a film through the American studio system that largely consists of scenes in which great character actors engage in relatively complex debates about Marxism and
Mhm.
about these political philosophies that are rarely referenced in Hollywood films. And to me, it is great fun watching, say, Maureen Stapleton stand up and give a speech, or denigrate Diane Keaton as she does in one memorable scene. But
Mhm.
I suppose I do agree with you in that it doesn't succeed for me as a love story. I can see why they decided to structure it that way in order to provide this emotional undercurrent, but I just wasn't as invested in that love triangle
Mhm.
as I was in this sense of the milieu as a whole.
Mhm.
And so I guess what I'm saying is I wish it had been even more of an art film, but then again,
Mhm.
he wouldn't have gotten millions of dollars to make it
Yeah,
if it
I can see what you're
had
saying because I do agree that when it was focusing on them as reporters, it
been.
was pretty good, and there was I mean, it's an amazing cast. But I mean, I almost think you could get rid of the Jack Nicholson character completely and just have it be about Warren Beatty and Diane Keaton's characters and their work. And that might make it better. I mean, I guess it's based on uh real people, so maybe they felt they had to. I don't know, but that was a first time watch for me. So that's been fun about this is there were a lot of first time watches for me in this group of 50. And so even if I didn't like love the film, it's always interesting kind of check these these classics, quote unquote, off your blind spot list.
Mm.
um yeah, another one, well, actually, let's see. I think that basically covers the ones that I didn't like. One that was interesting that I had felt like before in watching it was like, oh, this is so overrated. But for some reason, watching it this time, I had a new appreciation for it, and that is The Graduate. I think maybe because I wasn't expecting it to be a romance this time, and I was looking at it more as these characters, and it actually kind of in a way critiquing romantic stories, particularly the ending when they look at each other and they're like, what did we do? I don't know. I was just like, maybe this is okay. I wouldn't say I love it, but I had a better reaction to it than I previously had in this watch along. I don't know, what do you think
Mm.
about The Graduate?
So the thing with The Graduate for me is that I've always felt that it fails as an ostensible romance,
Yeah.
and I find it so funny reading about the fact that at the time you had these young kids who related to Benjamin and saw him as this hero and a representative of the rebellious spirit of their generation, and really rooted for him to get together with Elaine. And I think the big thing for me with the film is that it's certainly an interesting time capsule. You have a lot of fascinating formal experimentation in there for
Mhm.
me, but I've always felt that Anne Bancroft's performance is the reason that the movie is iconic.
Yeah.
She completely dominates during the first half of the film, and you can't take your eyes off of her. In 1967, I think it would have been even more jarring. It was even less common to see a character like this on screen. And even today, she seems startlingly fresh and modern.
Hmm.
And then during the back half of the film, when Mrs. Robinson largely disappears from view, and we have to watch Benjamin traveling to Elaine's university and desperately pursuing her, to me, it runs out of steam. And you could argue that that's the point. This young, slightly idealistic man who's moving away from being disaffected, but embracing the responsibilities that come with adulthood, which are slightly boring. I don't completely buy that. I think that the ending, which is very famous, would have even more of an impact for me if Elaine were less of a non-entity. And again, people have defended the fact that, oh, she's sort of vacant because she has this alcoholic mother and this troubled childhood. And that's why, oh gosh, what's her name? The actress, Catherine Ross, has such blank facial expressions. Having seen other Catherine Ross performances, I happen to think that it's just her limitations as an actress. And that character is so blank throughout the film, and I think it would have more pep if she just had something going for her.
I think her strongest scene is actually the scene in the club where he is not listening to her at all. He doesn't care what she wants and what, she's so uncomfortable. She keeps saying that she's uncomfortable, and he's almost getting a certain degree of pleasure out of seeing her so uncomfortable. So I think that's actually her strongest scene. But yeah, I would agree that that her character is mainly just a tool for the story. Like, it's not a dynamic, interesting character. And she's fine, I guess, an actress, but nothing special. But Mrs. Robinson, you just puzzle about her. At least I found myself this time just puzzling about her character, because she doesn't seem attracted to Ben hardly at all. She doesn't why is she in this relationship? I think it's very interesting. I think she just likes the control and the power of it. I don't know. I said in my review that there's an emptiness to her character I find fascinating. She's not really interested in Ben. She doesn't even seem attracted to him. She just wants someone to have an affair with, and he shows up at the right or wrong time, depending on how you look at it. And I said, everything feels perfunctory and transactional and not sexy or romantic in the least bit. I'm especially not sure what Mrs. Robinson gets out of this unless it is purely a need for physical intimacy. And that seems to be the main motivation for Ben. We see this when he takes Elaine to an exotic club later in the movie. He's only about the physical and doesn't care if it's upsetting to her. It's an interesting movie to think about. At least I found myself on this watch thinking about their character motivations and why they were making the choices they were making. But it absolutely does not work as a romance.
No.
So that was kind of an interesting one. I felt like I appreciated it more this go around. Some others that we have the ones that I knew I would like because I already started out the process liking them, like Pillow Talk. I love. I think it's so funny. They have, such great chemistry, and it really was kind of poking fun at Doris Day's image and sort of the whole idea of romance in the 50s, because this was in 1959. And so I think it's a really good satire. Yeah.
Yes, they are interesting films. I think for a lot of people, they are seen as representations of the Puritanism of the era and the discomfort with sex. And yet I do think there is a certain amount of, shall we say, dignity in there as a result of the fact that I do think Doris Day's performances are unusually tough and independent and headstrong for that period, for as much as she is the girl next door and the virgin. And so I do find the movie's sort of wink, wink, nudge, nudge approach to sex slightly less nauseating than it would be if she weren't a career woman with a life of her own, if she were just daddy's little girl who's never had a job.
Right. I can, yeah. And I mean, and it's so over the top with that Rex Stetson and everything. It's so silly that I think it's really funny. A couple others that I knew I would love because I love going into it. I love Dirty Dancing, and I think it's underappreciated for how much it takes on for the kind of movie it is. And I they have such great chemistry, and the dancing obviously is great. But I mean, the fact that it tackles topics like abortion and other things, you don't expect that in like a teen movie like this.
It's one that I've come to appreciate more
Hmm.
over time. I think I was very dismissive of it when I saw it as a teenager. To me, it's most interesting as an attempt to capture that very specific Jewish Borscht Belt milieu. And
Hmm.
I think we do see a lot of Jewish American culture in popular entertainment, but I think that specific branch of sort of upper middle class family working for the Peace Corps is something that you don't see that often. And I found that more intriguing on a
Hmm.
second watch. And I think especially when it's about this young girl sort of coming out of her shell, coming of her age, it's at its strongest.
Hmm.
I also find it very funny that it's meant to be a 60s period piece, and yet it's so
Yeah,
aggressively of its era in
it's
terms of
true.
being an 80s movie. I think there are plenty of people, even ones who watched it a lot as kids, who would think, oh, right, that movie was
Yeah,
set in 1987.
it's true.
It doesn't jump out as a 60s movie.
Yeah,
And so that's fun. And
yeah.
even Jennifer Grey is really quite good in the movie.
Hmm.
I even prefer her work in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but I do think it's an
Hmm.
uncommonly strong performance for that
Yeah,
genre.
I agree. Yes, I mean, I love The Princess Bride. I think it's nice to have some breakup in a list like this, so it's not all just a heavy, heavy, heavy. To have something that's a little more fun. But I just think Princess Bride gives you everything you could want in a movie. It's romantic, it's funny, it's got adventure, it's exciting, it's creative. It's one of the few movies where I think it's actually an improvement upon the book. Because the book, it has the author adding all this commentary, and I get really annoyed with it. Whereas in the movie, they have it be the grandpa, which just me is just like way more palatable. Doing the interruptions, the grandpa and the grandson. Um, but I just think it's super fun.
Welcome to the Pilot Podcast. My name is BJ.
And my name is Me Too, and we promise this promo is worth it, so please don't skip ahead.
We're two judgy friends who put our judgmental skills to work for you. We review the pilot episodes of new and popular shows and shows that our listeners request to answer your question, should I watch this?
Look, a lot of us are spending a lot more time at home, and yes, we should be reading and trying new projects and enriching ourselves, but does anything beat binging a great show?
Let us take the guesswork out of deciding what your next show will be. Tune in to The Pilot Podcast at thepilotpodcast.com.
Yes, I have very foggy memories of this one, so I don't feel quite equipped
Fair.
to comment on it. I think I
Yeah.
saw it once as a young girl, and I remember liking it. It just wasn't quite in the rotation of movies that I watched all the
Mhm.
time
Yeah.
as a kid. And I know for a lot of young Americans, because this movie plays on TV a lot, and
Mhm.
because it was one of the big videos that you could get back in the day, they've
Mhm.
seen it at least 20 times and they can quote it.
Yeah, it's a very
So,
quotable
yeah.
movie. Like it's very pithy and very, so I think that helps too. Uh
Mm.
it's just in like the popular pop culture consciousness, it's one of those. It's kind of like Monty Python in that way, it's just people quote it all the time.
Yes.
Um there's so many others that I love. I love The Apartment. I think that's such a great movie. I don't think it's a romantic comedy, but I still think it's really good, really well acted, and I guess I just respond to it because I had like a period in my life where I was doing the desk job like that, where it's just the worst, and you look for almost anything to get, at least for me, almost anything to get out of it. So like the temptation that he is faced with is like very understandable, I think. And it seems like so harmless. Like he's just giving up his apartment, no big deal. But then as things, like each decision that he makes, his morality is chipped away at bit by bit by bit by bit, and until finally at the end he realizes what he needs to do. And so I think it's a really good movie.
Hmm.
Mhm.
I agree. I think
Yeah.
it's one of the great American films, especially for that era. And it is a bit of a stretch to classify it as a romantic comedy. Yes, the romantic plot does play a significant role in driving the narrative forward, but one of the things that I've always felt was a smart creative decision on Billy Wilder's part is that the movie really doesn't foreground the growing attraction between Fran and Cece Baxter. And I think it's really important that at the end of the film, she's not completely infatuated with him yet.
Mhm.
She's still recovering from this awful affair that really did a number on her,
Yeah.
left her feeling at her lowest emotionally. But she is able to sort of embrace the idea of romance at the end of the film. And
Mhm.
so even if they are not madly in love yet, there is that possibility there.
Yeah.
And I
It's such
think
a good ending. Shut up and
yes.
deal.
Oh gosh, it's
It's so
perfect.
good.
Yes.
I love What's Up, Doc. That's a favorite of mine. I think that is so funny.
Mm.
Just that slapstick madcap. It's I think one of the best examples of one of my favorite scenes in the movie is this scene where these they're all over the streets and having this car chase, and there's these people carrying this piece of glass across the street,
Ah,
and they take, there's like 3 times where it crashed to the glass, and then they're like, nope, psych, and then again and again, and then finally it does. But they really milk that joke for everything that it can be, and I think that's just a good example of. And Madeline Kahn is, I just think, maybe the funniest lady ever in movies.
oh
She was
God.
so funny.
Mm. It's such a shame that we didn't get to see more of her,
Mhm.
obviously. She died at a young age, tragically. But I really do think that this is one of those films that does make a strong case for her as the
Yeah.
great screwball comedian of this period.
Yeah.
And it is so entertaining to see a movie made at that time that really does have a lot in common with the 30s movies that it's inspired by.
Mhm.
And to make such a direct homage is often a bit risky. Sometimes these movies come across as sort of unimaginative projects because they are so committed to drawing inspiration from other pieces of art. Sometimes they lack that quality of freshness and inspiration that we're looking for. And I don't think that's a problem in this case.
Yeah, I don't think so. Well, another one that I was probably my favorite movie when I was when I was in college. It was very influential for me. Is actually Breakfast at Tiffany's, and I understand that it has its big Mr. Yonioshi flaw. Uh, but I think if you're able to take that out, and I understand that's a big take, I get it, but I just love everything else about the movie. I love Holly and Fred as character, and Paul as characters. I think they're so interesting, and you're never quite sure what they're going to be doing next. And I love the music. I love the but mainly the characters and their interactions together and how they really need each other. And that ending scene is one of my favorites of all movies, when he says, you know, what's the matter with you? You're chicken. You got no guts. You're afraid to stick out your neck and say life's a fact. People do fall in love. People do belong to each other. That's the only chance we have of real happiness. And then he says, you call yourself a free spirit, a wild thing. You're terrified someone's going to put you in a cage, but baby, you're already in that cage. You built it yourself. And I absolutely love that whole scene. And then she realizes, and she comes after, and they find Kat. And so I understand that some people can't get over the Yoshi, but I still love them. I love the movie. So yeah,
I have some big reservations with this one. Obviously, Mr. Yoshi is one of them, but I've always felt that as an adaptation of the novella, it's very unsuccessful. I think the screenplay has this big problem in that the novella, of course, is essentially plotless. It's a character study. It's an opportunity to explore Holly's bifurcated personality and the complexities of her inner life and her attempt to construct this new persona in New York and leave her past behind. And the movie cannot deal with being basically plotless. It is 114 minutes long. And when it's not doling out exposition about who Holly used to be, or inserting sort of convenient shots of other characters commenting on her, I think it just doesn't have the same qualities as a piece of literature, and it never finds cinematic analogues to find a way to explain sort of the central mysteries of the plot.
Yeah.
And so to me, it always feels a bit stillborn on the screen. You have the incredible fashion, of course. Audrey Hepburn looks amazing. And I've also felt that she's kind of miscast. I think in her hands, the character is too whimsical in a way. And while this is essentially literally stated by other characters, I never felt in her performance that bittersweet, melancholy sort of aftertaste that you experience after meeting this woman, where, oh yes, she's trying to seem jolly and gay and happy, but underneath it all, she's laughing through the tears.
Yeah, the mean reds. The mean reds, they didn't work for you. Didn't convey that enough when she's talking about how the mean reds are terrible. The blues are just, you're having a bad day, but the mean reds.
No, it didn't quite work for me. I think everything felt too cutesy. Even in the scenes where this woman is meant to be genuinely devastated and down in the dumps, she just seemed too girlish in my eyes. And
I can see that.
Yeah. And I also wondered, one of the big features of the novella is that George Papard's character is gay. And I think changing that in the movie without making significant adjustments, I felt, means that it's very odd when it's implied that, oh yes, these two people are in love at the end of the film, instead of having this close friendship, because it definitely feels at the beginning of the movie like they've retained elements of the novella where he is slightly aloof and admires this woman from afar in the way that a potential friend would, instead of being physically attracted to her.
Yeah, I can see that. That makes sense. I can see that. They definitely went for a more rom-com arc for his character.
We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies merch store.
Are you looking for that perfect gift for the postable, Hardy, or Hallmarky in your life?
What about getting that t-shirt or hoodie that will help you stand out at your next holiday party?
Now is the time to check out the Hallmarkies merch store.
Full of festive designs by artists like Jessica Miller, Carrie from Hallmark Comics, and more.
You can even have more than just shirts, but totes, cell phone cases, notebooks, mugs, and more.
And it isn't just Hallmark. We have designs for Anna Green Gables, Man from Snowy River, The Nanny, and more.
Every purchase at the merch store goes to help support the podcast and allows us to make the great content you know and love.
There are frequent sales, so go to tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies or see the link in the description.
That's tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies.
Well, some that I had never seen before that I ended up really enjoying. That was the fun part about this. The first one, I really enjoyed The Goodbye Girl. I thought that it was charming. And there weren't that many like just traditional romantic comedies on this list. I feel like there's some, but there was a lot of like passion in other ways than like rom-com. And I thought this I had never seen it before. I don't know how I had never seen it. I'm not going to say they had like the most amazing chemistry. It was just okay for me, but I thought the script and the banter and the everything, I thought it was charming.
Yes, I agree. And I tend to run cold on Neil Simon. I would say that
Mhm.
this is one of his scripts that really works. I think that the actors have a good handle on that style of dialogue. And I think it does help that the director, Herbert Ross, is willing to open things up somewhat. You do have multiple locations, and I think crucially, you do get some shots where Richard Dreyfuss and Marsha Mason are walking through the New York City streets, or he's standing outside and she's inside. And so you have enough variation there that it doesn't feel claustrophobic. Because some other adaptations of his work suffer from being too stage bound, and they're essentially set in one room, like a play, and you
Mhm.
get the sense that, well, what I'm getting here is basically just filmed theatre. This doesn't feel cinematic. And with The Goodbye Girl, there are at least attempts to expand it and to introduce something new to the material on
Mhm.
screen. And I can see why Dreyfuss ended up winning Best Actor for this. He's very good.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Another Neil Simon that I really enjoyed was actually Barefoot in the Park. I don't know how you feel about that one, but I thought the mother character in that actress and everything, she was so funny. I was really cracking up. Then when she like every time she has to climb those stairs, she's just like, "What am I doing for my daughter?" And I really enjoyed anything with particularly the side characters than the main couple. I thought were really funny to me. And I could see how it had the bones of a play. I think I probably like The Goodbye Girl better, but I did think that mother character was really funny.
I agree. I think she was the highlight of the
Yeah.
film too. And Mildred Natwick is this really warm, unaffected presence. And I was really pleased by the fact that there are times where the film really cedes the floor to her and kind of allows her to become the protagonist. And while the writing of this character isn't necessarily radical, I was still somewhat pleased to see a movie in which an older woman who has a love life is presented in a positive light and can
Yeah,
be
that's true.
funny and charming. Because I do think, unfortunately, there is still a strong strain of ageism and misogyny in a lot of these 60s movies in terms of their treatment of older women.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. And or they're just very one note, whereas this had a really funny personality and she did get her own arc, like you're saying. So that I agree. That was definitely the strength of the movie. Uh, I have to admit that I struggled with a lot of this with most of the silent movies on the list, and I think that's just my own weakness of not getting distracted and staying invested in the story. Those were ones that I struggled with. I think just my dyslexia sometimes struggles with silent movies. Uh, but I think my favorite of all of them was definitely Sunrise.
Hmm.
That was a new one to me. I hadn't seen, and I thought the story was the most engrossing of those silent movies.
I'm a big fan of silent cinema, and I was glad to see a couple of silent films on the list. I still feel, I don't know if you agree with me, with these AFI lists, the criteria does seem to be a bit narrow. And I get the sense that the people voting on these lists are not like you and I. They do
Yeah.
not seem to be the most cine literate people. And in certain cases, you do get the sense that they've just picked the titles that they had heard of, the best known films.
Mhm.
And I think that's one of the reasons why, as critics, we do tend to gravitate towards critics' lists instead of curated selections put together by people with less knowledge of cinema. And you still get a relatively interesting selection here,
Mhm.
but it's not quite as diverse as it could be. And I
Yeah.
think the lack of silent cinema kind of does reflect the fact that I don't think they did their work before voting on this thing.
Mhm.
At the same time, Sunrise, wonderful, one of the pioneering American classics of that period.
Mhm.
And while I think I still find it a bit difficult to swallow the fact that this woman forgives and falls back in love with her husband an hour after he attempted to murder her.
That's
Uh, there's still some incredible imagery in there, and Janet Gaynor is such a brilliant actress that I almost buy that emotional transformation. She
yeah.
is so transfixing that you almost think, okay, I'm just going to go with this.
Yeah. Yeah, I said in my just little reaction on Letterboxd, I said that this is the best silent movie I've ever seen that doesn't have Keaton or Chaplin in it. But I mean, I haven't seen that many, but I do think that's true.
Hmm.
I agree. Her performance is excellent, really good. So the biggest win for me though, as far as ones I had not seen that I ended up really loving out of these 50 was A Place in the Sun. I had never seen it before, and I walked away feeling it was one of the best movies I think I've ever seen. I thought it was absolutely great. The script is so engaging. You're trying to I mean, he has such an unlikable, this guy is so unlikable, but oddly transfixing, at least to me, about what is he going to do. You didn't trust him at all with either of these women. I thought that the acting was absolutely great, um, beautifully shot, well made. I don't know how it'd take me this long to see it, but I thought it was really good.
Yes, I agree. It's really beautifully put together, as you point out. And I had to wonder, what did you think of the lead performances?
Oh, I thought they were all three of them were excellent.
Mhm.
Like I thought Shelley Winters was just mousy enough and just kind of clingy enough that you start to kind of you start to sort of turn away a little bit from her character, but then you realize like, oh my gosh, she certainly doesn't deserve what happens to her or the way that she's treated. So the script did a great job with that as far as of creating these characters that you have all these sort of mixed feelings for. And I mean, Elizabeth Taylor probably has the least going on as far as her role, but she's still pretty interesting as far as like her attraction to this guy and her relationship with her dad, and kind of what she's getting out of this. And you feel sad for her at the end because she's really in love with him, and then she realizes that he's a terrible person. And uh, I and he's Montgomery Clift really good. Is this terrible person? I,
Hmm.
I thought I gave it a perfect score on Letterboxd. I really just thought it was outstanding.
I think unfortunately for me, I can't quite go all the way with it in that as an adaptation of that book, which is very dark and very cynical, very much kind of a lacerating view of the American dream, the movie can't seem to decide whether it wants to be this dreamy romantic drama about how Montgomery Clift and Elizabeth Taylor should have been together all along, or whether it wants to be that darker telling of the story. And so I did feel that touches such as having Elizabeth Taylor walk in to visit Montgomery Clift shortly before he is sent off to be executed just don't play right. We cut to her crying face, and I really did get the sense that that was designed so that the girls in the theatre in 1951 could weep over, oh, they should have gotten together, and isn't it sad that they were separated by circumstance? And I have nothing against a good, what do you call it, a three-hanky picture. I just felt as though it robs the story of some of its import. And I really do feel that that political subtext is kind of undercut here, and the movie is defanged in order to increase its commercial prospects. And as you point out, I think Shelley Winters is probably, of all the actors in the film, doing the best work, in that I really admire her commitment to making this character feel, in a realistic way, unglamorous and somewhat unsympathetic. And I really do feel that she is able to create a more full-bodied character than Clift and Taylor, who, in addition to acting, you can definitely sense in a lot of their scenes were being asked to sort of pose sexily for the camera. And to me, that was a bit of a distraction for them, I felt, because every time he has to sort of deliver an important line of dialogue, he also has to be smoldering at her. And it didn't feel quite as sharp as it could have.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I felt there was an ambiguity to his character that I really responded to, where I didn't know kind of what he was going to do. Like I knew he was I I I think that there was, like, it starts out with being this like typical love story, which they have this whirlwind romance, uh him and Shelley Winters' character, and then you feel like, okay, he didn't even realize kind of what was happening, and then but he's just so calculated and so cold, and so I don't know. I found that transfixing is how trying to figure out, okay, what is this person going to do? There was something kind of cold and manipulative, I think, about him. But I can see what you're saying too. I really didn't know hardly anything about it. I think I'd heard about it, and I watched it. I was just like, wow, that was very impressive. So that was a big surprise for me, and that was really fun. Let's see, a couple others that were good that I hadn't seen before. Well, I'd seen it before, but I think Double Indemnity is really great. I don't know why it's on this list, because there's like one, but I think it's a really good movie. I think it's so well acted, so well shot. All this, it builds up tension so well. I think that one's excellent. I also really love Sense Sensibility with Ong Lee. I'm glad that they had at least one Austen on this list, because how can you have a list about romance or passion and not have anything with Jane Austen? But I love Sense Sensibility. I think it's wonderful. I mean, if I'm going to nitpick, I don't think that Emma Thompson should have cast herself as Eleanor, because she's too old for the part. The character in the book is much younger. But Kate Winslet's great. It's so well made. so well acted. Um, Hugh Grant isn't the best, but he's fine. Anyway, I love one of my favorite scenes in a movie is in Sense and Sensibility when Edward comes back and Eleanor just starts to ugly cry because you almost never see that in movies. You'll see like a tear drip. You never see like the like, true ugly cry in the way that we all do. And so I love that choice that Emma Thompson that she made for that role. But anyway, that I was glad that was on the list.
I can see what you're saying about double indemnity. It is one of those cases where I think they threw the criteria out the window and just picked the film because it is a great movie and it's very well known. But yes, watching the film, you don't think, oh, wow, Phyllis and Walter are really in love. I wouldn't say that I ever felt that way, but of course, Barbara Stanwyck's performance is so memorable, and even the visual style of the film, while it
so
does have certain things in common with other noirs, the use of black and white is different from anything that I've ever seen, really. And that famous shot of the two of them meeting up in the grocery store, her with her glasses on and her trashy blonde hair, is just wonderful.
Yeah, it was really, really, really good. Well, we could talk all day, but yeah, it's been a really fun project so far, and I look forward to doing the remaining 50 movies. And so if you want to read my weekly reviews, if you're listening and you want to read the weekly reviews, sign up for the Patreon. I think it's well worth your investment, not only to get exclusive reviews, but also we have the patron watch alongs once a month with talent, where you get to get a peek behind the movie making process. Like in June, we have director Sean Pacino coming on, and we're going to watch his movie Holiday Harmony. So if you want a chance to hear from actors, directors, writers, and find out about the process, it's a great experience to be on the Patreon, and then also have the weekly AFI Passions reviews. We're going to have it for at least another year with these, with 50 more. I really look forward to it. And thank you so much, Zita, for coming on talking about these movies. This was a lot of fun.
I had a fantastic time, and thank you so much for having me back on. I would love to come back on again in the future. And again, just thanks for doing this.
Yeah, it'd be fun. We should do like a deep dive into classic romances sometime. That would be fun.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, how can people follow you, your content, you on social media, all that fun stuff?
Well, I'm on Twitter at Zita_short, and I serve as a film critic for In Session Film and KeithLovesMovies.com, so you can find some of my work there. And I'm also on Letterboxd at Zita Short.
I don't know if I'm actually following you on Letterboxd. I gotta make sure I'm doing that. But yeah, you can find me at Letterboxd as well. And like I said, sign up for the Patreon and you get every single one of every Sunday, I post one of the AFI Passions reviews. And so check that out. And also make sure you're following me at Rachel's Reviews, all of our social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. Check that out. Also follow the podcast, Hallmarkies Pod and Hallmarkies Podcast, all of our social media. And if you are listening on iTunes, please leave your ratings and reviews. That really, really helps us a lot. And if you are listening on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. We appreciate that so much. And like I said, we have the Patreon group and merch store. Check that out. And thanks again, Zita. I really appreciate it. And we'll talk to you all later. Bye.